we're going to take a look at 4 what I'm calling vintage major chord fills or embellishments in the style of Steve Cropper, who played on and produced Dock of the Bay. So last video we took a look at Dock of the Bay in terms of its chordal composition, and a couple things we noticed. It's all major chords, G up to B, up to C, down to A, G to A, down to E. Part of what makes this song come alive, besides it's just a great song and sung by a real wonderful artist, Otis Redding, died too young. The little guitar fills are terrific. To back up a little bit, Steve Cropper is best known as a studio guitarist, played behind so many people, Sam and Dave, Otis Redding, as we just talked about, as well as Carla and Rufus Thomas, and Aretha, and others. He played guitar in the house band for Stax Records for many years, Booker T and the MGs. They backed up a lot of those acts that were on Stax Records, as well as recording their own stuff. So Steve really created helped to create what was known as the Memphis sound at the time. Steve was also a member of the Blues Brothers band, and you've probably seen him in the Blues Brothers movies. A couple of interesting notes. Looking at the song Dock of the Bay, as I said, it's all major chords. And I think one of the reasons, although it sounds terrific, but I think one of the reasons is that Otis Redding was known to carry around an acoustic guitar with him, tuned to an open chord, and he would bang this stuff out. And when he was staying on the Bay in San Francisco, he got the inspiration for the song and brought the bones of it to Steve Cropper, and they kind of put it together. Steve wrote some of the lyrics, but the whole basic outline, I think, of it was Otis Redding's. Let's take a look at the song step by step and just break apart some of the little cool guitar fills that Steve Cropper does. By the way, this song, Dock of the Bay, is 68 it came out, so we're talking about 51 years ago. Now, when Steve played these little licks off of the major chords in this song, I'm calling them vintage, but by the time he played them, they were already vintage. Again, to recap his career, he was not only a guitarist in Booker T and the MGs, but he also was a producer for Stax Records and an A&R guy, too. Now, when Steve Cropper was growing up, he was influenced by, like a jazz player like Tal Farlow, down onto Chuck Berry, and Chet Atkins, and you name it. So some of these little things that he did, I'm sure he picked up along the way, and they certainly weren't original to Steve, but he just put them in just the right place and in just the right way. Getting back to this little signature lick there, let's take a look at the first verse. You've got this little bass line running, which is played by Donald Duck Dunn, the bassist for Booker T and the MGs. I think that little riff was invented by Steve Cropper, so that is not counting as one of the 4 major embellishments here. If we look at the G chord, up to the B chord, C, chromatically down to the A, it repeats that again. Then at the end of the verse, it climbs up to the A, down to an E. Let's look at what Steve fills in with there. So he's got an interval of a third hammered on. So if you look at your G chord here, Here's the third of the chord. Here's the fifth. Very, very common cliche lick. And then he also goes down to the root. So a kind of a pull-off. Hammer on and pull-off. Now, he's likely playing it here. Here's the G chord. Because his next chord he plays is a double stop or a little two-note thing off of the B. So here's the whole B chord. Now even picking this register up here adds just that little bit of brightness to it that sounds so great. So the first chord, G, a third, hammered on, to another third. Essentially it's the same type of an embellishment. Then up to the C. Little staccato slide down to the A. Now here he does another embellishment, which is basically an A sus to an A major. And I think he does a hammer on and pull off on that very quickly, which adds another flavor to it. Now, another cool little thing he does, which I wouldn't have thought of, he does the G chord up to the B. Now, when he's barring the B, he just carries it over, all the way over, and makes a little sixth chord out of it. And we talked about all these triads and sixth chords and all that in an earlier session. Then he goes up again to the C. From the G. Okay, next in the progression comes the G down to the E. What he does here is very clever. I wouldn't have thought of it again. He plays the G, hammer on. Now that F sharp is the ninth of E. You could call it an E2 if you wanted to. But let's just call it an E, add 9. He's hammering on the and pulling off on the G, dropping down. And he's actually playing the ninth and the fifth of that E chord. Ingenious and simple. So simple but effective. Just before going to the bridge, a nice little slide up to the third of E. And I think he plays the open string too, which is kind of cool. Then you're into the bridge. Now, a minor note is that I don't know if he's playing, probably playing a hybrid style with the pick and finger. I've seen him do that in videos. He could have been, but I'm choosing to just do this whole thing, fingers alone. It just feels better to me and sounds more natural. You do it however you want to do it. And we mentioned this in the last video. G to D, C. I don't even think they anticipate that C chord. It's just straight G, C, D. Now here you will hear Steve doing a signature which is a sixth interval. And that's based off of a G chord. So here's a classic embellishment off of a major chord using sixth intervals. You probably already know it, but Steve is sliding. So he's playing the sixth interval, which is the fifth and the third of the G chord. Then to the D chord, again sliding the fifth and the third of D. He doesn't even do that little vibrato I'm doing. He just, I have a habit of sustaining the notes. The last time in the bridge, not the chorus, D to C, goes back to the G, then it drops down to the F, which we talked about in the last segment. That F is kind of a substitute of a 5 chord, which then he goes to the 5 chord, which is D, back to the tonic, which is G. What he does there in the fills is so this is played over the F. Same embellishment as this over the G. Setting it back up out of the bridge back into the verse. Playing again an interval of a sixth, the third in the root here, off of the D chord. And if you did that whole figure, it would be hear that time and time again. One other thing I'll mention. So there are the 4 techniques that Steve uses in this particular song. One thing that the piano player does during the bridge, G, D, C. Off of that C chord, it's the pianist implies a C 7th chord. It's one of the few chords other than that kind of E2 chord that's outside of just a straight major triad, and he just does which is a great guitar embellishment actually. Okay, so you have the E and G off of the C chord, then you go up, move up to the F, to the A, and then hammer on to the G and the B flat. So when you go up to the B flat, you're implying a C 7th chord. I'm hammering on to the third from the flatted third. Anyway, that's just an aside thrown in. You could call that number 5 if you wanted, but it's not off of a straight major chord, so it doesn't really count. Anyway, that's a look at a classic song, over 50 years old, using some terrific little simple chord fills that you can use yourself. I hope you've enjoyed this, and we will see you next time right here on the same channel, Neil Clapp Guitar, where we'll be going into some cool chord analysis a little bit deeper, and we'll build some foundations for the series to come after that. Don't forget to check out the description where I will include some links to some helpful videos and sources that are related to this topic, as I have done in the past. So again, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.